Joining me today in the Capital TV show, Cameron Hudson, his former CIA, former Chief of Staff. Mr. Hudson, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much.
Do you think that a number of African countries can accept refugees from Afghanistan? And you saw the behavior of Abu Dhabi in dealing with this crisis. It was amazing. So what is the situation in Africa? And is there any program to receive refugees from Afghanistan?
Well, there isn't an organized program for the continent to receive these refugees. I think it's fair to say, though, when you look at the global refugee crisis, and it is a crisis, the vast majority of these refugees are inside of Africa. So whether they are internally displaced or they've crossed borders within Africa, we tend to think about the refugee crisis as moving into Europe or the United States. But in fact, Africa has been hosting massive refugee populations for decades. So they are, in fact, very well organized and equipped for receiving these kinds of refugees. We have seen so far Uganda take in the first group of Afghan refugees. I have not heard other countries receiving them. But of course, when they are received in African countries, it is local and international NGO partners who are really doing the bulk of the work to integrate and care for these refugees. So I do think that Africa is doing its share in this global crisis to try to receive these refugees coming out of Afghanistan. But we can't forget that it is international donors, Western donors, the UN, that is enabling that receipt as well.
Do you think in the other side that China is expanding in Africa? Is China a competitor to United States in Africa right now?
Well, certainly. I mean, I think there are many countries who are competitors to the United States. Europe is a competitor to the United States in business deals. China is obviously a strategic competitor because its interests are not necessarily aligned, and certainly its values are not aligned with American values or interests. And so I think the challenge that we face with China is not just competition in a business or political sense. It really is an ideological battle that is being waged at the same time of the financial battle that we see. And I think that we have to remember in all of this that Africans don't want to be seen as the subjects of a great power competition. They do not want to be seen as chess pieces on the board that China and the United States are moving about. And I think that what the United States is trying to do, I think, really is appeal to the shared values and interests of African countries, allow them to make choices about who their partners are. And increasingly, Africans are expressing their desire for non-Chinese choices.
About Libya, what do you see the situation there? There is an elections coming on, and do you think that the crisis still unsolvable, and does that affect the neighborhoods negatively?
Well, as you said, Libya has been a source of instability for the broader North Africa region for more than a decade, since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. And we have seen just recently, as a matter of fact, countries like Chad, Sudan, Niger, Burkina Faso signing agreements on shared security and joint security, because so many of their citizens have gone to Libya to fight, and they're very worried about the effects of those combatants returning well armed, well trained, but without job, without income. And so what will they do when they return to their country? So there is a real threat of instability as the combatants in the Libya conflict return home. Obviously, the hope is that with great Western involvement, with the United Nations mission there, that elections will bring about a much needed era of stability inside of Libya. I think that neighbors must remain concerned. We've already seen the spillover effects from Libya in the Sahel, in Mali, the rise of jihadism. We've seen it in Sudan. And so the effects have already been felt for many, many years. The hope now is that we don't see a resurgence of that, as we have seen a resurgence in extremism and extremist activity across that sort of middle belt of Africa. We hope that returning Libyan fighters won't aggravate that. So it's really incumbent upon African states with Western partners to try to curtail and limit the fallout effects of those fighters returning home.
Very thoughtful. On the other side, is Israel now gaining some benefits in Africa at the moment?
Well, I think Israel is certainly trying to upgrade its relationships with all countries, but specifically, I think with African countries. We have seen through the Abraham Accords a historic agreement with Sudan, talks with Morocco, and others. And so I think that you're seeing, and of course, recently Israel regained observer status at the African Union. And so I think you're seeing a real diplomatic effort on the part of Israel to engage African states, both Arab states and non-Arab states across the African continent, and really trying to increase its diplomatic relations, opening new embassies. So I think that Israel has a lot to offer African states in terms of investment, in terms of technology, in terms of medical assistance, agricultural expertise, and certainly how to survive in arid climates. And so I think that there's a great benefit for African countries seeking new ties with Israel and vice versa.
Mr. Hudson, what you can say about the Biden administration strategy toward the African countries in general?
Well, it's still an evolving strategy, and they have not made yet any real declarations on how they intend to approach the continent. Obviously, they have staked out some issues in human rights. And we've seen that from a very strong response to what's going on inside of Ethiopia and the human rights situation there. We've also heard them, and they've announced that they will be holding a summit on democracy this year and again next year. So clearly trying to institutionalize democratic norms across the continent, I think is going to be a cornerstone of the Biden administration strategies towards Africa. And then I think continuing on this investment impetus that we saw under Obama and again under Trump and now again under the Biden administration, again, moving away from a trade dependent style relationship to investment led growth. And I think we have some new mechanisms in the United States, primarily through something called the Development Finance Corporation, to enable more U.S. companies, more U.S. businesses to invest in Africa. They're really going to be the best ambassadors that we have, bringing U.S. business ethics to the countries in Africa and helping, cement U.S. diplomatic relationships as well.
Do you think, on the other hand, that Ethiopia and Egypt will go to war over the Renaissance Dam?
Well, it remains to be seen.
Yeah.
I mean, it remains to be seen. I think that there's been a lot of diplomatic effort. Certainly the African Union, the United Nations has spoken to this subject, and the U.S. has a special envoy in the Horn of Africa region right now who is trying to mediate between the parties. I think the challenge right now is that you see Ethiopia really in the throes of its own civil war and its own political tumult. And so I think that makes it challenging if one party is not fully engaged and fully invested in a negotiation process. It makes it hard for outside actors or mediators to force a decision when you have one party that is dealing with an internal instability right now, like Ethiopia. So I think it really remains very difficult. We're obviously seeing a lot of impatience on the part of Egypt and Sudan, who both want to see a final resolution to the GERD issue. I don't think that it will move into a warlike scenario. Obviously, we're moving out of the rainy season. And so now that the second filling of the dam has occurred, I think tensions can begin to lower. I think we need to use this opportunity to reinvigorate diplomacy, to try to reach a permanent solution so that we don't come up again like we did this year with a raining season coming ahead and no decisions being made on the final status of the dam, and that creating even greater tensions about what Ethiopia will do.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that terrorist organizations such as Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and whatever, do they have a presence in Africa, and how to contain their activities there?
Well, yes, they have a growing presence in Africa. I think that there's real concern, and there should be real concern, that you're seeing a stretch from the Atlantic to the Red Sea of growing terrorist ascendancy. I mean, we've seen in Somalia for going on 20 years now, a kind of extremist fight, but now emanating out of the Sahel from Mali into Mauritania, Chad, Burkina Faso, Niger, stretching all across that middle belt of Africa. There's real concern. And of course, now you're seeing it moving south into places like Madagascar. I think the one thing that unites all of these different fights and the rise of these different groups is a sense of state failure, that governments in these countries have not been able to deliver for their citizens. So these citizens are feeling disenfranchised, they're feeling disempowered, they're feeling like they have been left behind in a global economy. And so they are fighting back, and they're doing it by joining these Islamist extremist groups. They're doing it because it gives them a sense of identity, a sense of purpose, an income. And so unless countries, host governments, can begin to solve these problems by, providing services, providing a form of representative government, providing safety and security and a future for their citizens, then if they can't do that, and certainly Western countries can't do that on their behalf, we can support and assist, but we cannot do the nation building on our own. And I think that's one thing that President Biden has been trying to say with respect to the withdrawal from Afghanistan, is we can support and we can assist, but at the end of the day, we cannot be a replacement for state authority in any of these countries. And that is precisely what is required if we hope to address the ascendancy of some of these extremist groups.
My last question in this interview, Mr. Hudson, you said in one of your tweets, as the people of Chad struggle through a transition, they are again reminded of their long search for justice with the death of former dictator Hussein Habri. What is the point of this subject you mentioned in?
Well, I just think that so often we talk about justice and accountability for the crimes that have been committed. And in a place like Chad, which has suffered greatly for more than 30 years at the hands of various autocratic governments who have preyed on their citizens, the people of Chad, the victims of Chad, rose up and actually sued their former president in a special tribunal and won. Now, they haven't received any kind of compensation. They haven't received that kind of justice, but they have received the kind of justice that comes with acknowledgement of the crimes that were committed against them. And I think that now there's an opportunity in a place like Chad, which is experiencing yet again another transition, to try to put some of these countries on a long-term path towards stability. Much of this requires justice. It requires accountability and truth-telling about the crimes that were committed in the past. And I think that the longer countries like Chad go without this measure of justice and accountability, the harder it will be to create stable and secure and prosperous societies going forward.
Mr. Cameron Hudson, thank you so much, former CIA, former Chief of Staff Office of the U.S. Special Envoy to Sudan, U.S. Department of State. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.